right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, after what seems like the longest wait of any movie ever, mostly because of the pandemic, of course, we are talking about Scott Cooper's Antlers. This was a movie that was on our 2020 most anticipated movies of the year list, which is something I've stopped doing now because who can tell anything with release dates anymore? But back then, I was really looking forward to it. It got delayed a whole bunch, and it's finally out, and it should still be in theaters for a couple more weeks, I'd say, at the time that this goes up. So make sure you go see it. But if you haven't gotten a chance and it's out of the theaters by you, I'm sure it'll be on VOD any day now because the world's changing very fast, and that's what happens now. So you'll get to see it one way or another, and I do recommend it. And I have a great conversation coming up here with filmmaker Riley Cusick, who joined me to talk puzzle pieces about Antlers. So that's coming up in a second. And before we get into it, I do want to remind you all, as always, to make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. You can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, on Pocket Casts, on Good Pods, or just subscribe wherever. And, you can also follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. Join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where the conversation continues about all the movies we talk about here on the show. And don't forget about our Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content from Piecing It Together, as well as bonus stuff from Awesome Movie Year and stuff from my music career. So lots of great content over there on the Patreon. Check that out at patreon.com/bydavidrosen. So, with all that said, let's finally talk about Antlers. All right, so it has been a long time coming to talk about this movie. We'll get into some of that during the conversation, I'm sure. But we're going to talk about Antlers, and joining me today is Riley Cusick, his first time here on the show. Riley, how's it going?
It's going great. First time caller. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about this movie, and I'm glad to have you here on the show. You are a filmmaker, of course. Why don't you tell people a little about you and what you got going on with your upcoming film?
It's not Antlers, unfortunately, not promoting that one, but I've got one coming out in November 23rd called Autumn Road, which I wrote, directed, and I acted in, played two twins.
And I was reading, you have like a few short films out right now. Is this your first feature?
Yeah, I made like half a dozen short films, and then we went
Mhm.
out with that good old can-do indie spirit, made Autumn Road, and that comes out, and then we just wrapped on our second feature actually about last month. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's
Very
cool. It's
cool.
fun. I'm
Just keeping
excited.
it moving. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, we're gonna get into Antlers today, and I always like to ask my guests, like before we start getting into the puzzle pieces and everything, was this a big anticipated movie for you? Were you looking forward to this? I mean, I know before you answer, like this was a big delayed movie of 2020 with the pandemic and everything, and so I was really looking forward to it back then. And then this was like, of course, we had Dune and we had Bond and we had all these things. I kept thinking like this is never coming out. Like I really didn't know if it would ever happen, and here we are. It finally did.
I felt the same way. It was top of my list for
Hmm.
anticipated movies when it was going to come out before. So that's only
Hmm.
been growing over time, which maybe that's a recipe for failure. But
Right, right. Yeah, that doesn't always
I
work
still
out.
I still really liked it. No,
Yeah, I liked it too, and we'll get into some of what worked and what didn't along the way. But we might as well start getting into some puzzle pieces here, and we'll talk about all the other things as we're going through them. What do you have for your first puzzle piece here for Antlers?
let's do it. My first one. It's a bit of a cheat answer, but it's the 1979 Alien,
Hmm.
and it's a bit of a cheat answer because Cooper himself, the director, has cited it as an inspiration, talked about watching it many times, and build up for this film. But I also, in watching it, just naturally took that away, and that
Hmm.
he had this animatronic creature and the tone, the grounded supernatural tone that he had going on. And I think when he talks about what he took away, it's that heroine like Ripley who can be both strong but also compassionate and vulnerable. And I saw that in the film, and I thought that Alien was a puzzle piece if there ever were one.
Absolutely, yeah, it is on my list as well, and definitely makes sense here. And I that's interesting to hear that Cooper had cited it himself. That totally makes sense. I think there's so many parallels here. You know, you've got the monster. You don't really see that much towards the end. You've got basically the hero being completely at this monster's will. Like you can't do anything about this thing. Like all you could do really is survive at this point until, she steps up and saves the day basically. But this thing is just so overpowering, kind of like a xenomorph in a way.
Yeah, it has that perfect organism vibe to it. And it
Yeah,
also, in addition to that, it has the stages, like it grows inside of a person
sure.
and there's these layers to it existing that I think are really interesting.
Absolutely. So I'll go ahead and jump to another puzzle piece here. And this also, I guess I would describe as a cheat because I'm not really going to use one specific movie, but I'm going to use the werewolf movie genre because I feel like, even though we're dealing with a Wendigo here, which is a different kind of mythical creature, which has appeared in other movies where it's specifically cited, I feel like the movie kind of takes the werewolf movie trajectory of, the overwhelmed police officer who has to kind of keep it from the town so things don't get too far out of control, and they're trying to hide the fact that first animals and then people are starting to get killed, and more people start getting killed as it goes, and it's brutal and just incredibly violent, and they just know that shit will hit the fan if it gets out, and so they have to kind of keep it under wraps. And that's kind of a thing that I think happens in the Wolfman, last year's The Wolf of Snow Hollow. There was a comedy this year, Werewolves Within. I mean, it seems to be a thing in werewolf movies, that they always have to kind of keep it under wraps or else shit's gonna hit the fan.
I totally see that. I think you also see that in the way that the characters are wrestling with themselves and this dark part of themselves that they have inside, and I think you see that
Hmm.
in a lot of werewolf movies. And then there's also that, just this primal animalistic presence in
Sure.
there that we all share.
Absolutely. Yeah, and also lots of great night shots. This is a very beautiful looking movie. That's one of the things that kind of stuck out the most about it, and a lot of Scott Cooper's movies are. But cinematography here just gorgeous, and that's kind of a thing with werewolf movies. I mean, the moonlight and everything always makes for such awesome looking films.
Yeah, it was Oregon, wasn't it? That's where this one takes
Yes,
place.
absolutely.
Yeah, no, it was beautiful. There's no wrong place to put a camera in Oregon.
Yeah,
Everything has a mountain or a tree or something in the background, and that's nice.
sure,
But
sure.
even in the mine, there's a lot of stuff where they go into this mine, and there's like a ton of negative black space going on, and that's always really beautiful in this
Oh
one.
yeah, absolutely. Well, what do you got for your next piece?
My next one's a bit more literal, and it's the 2001 film Wendigo by Larry Fessenden.
Hmm.
And I think Cooper had said, Scott Cooper, he had said that there was some professor or someone who was his like main source of, oh, this is the Wendigo expert. But I disagree. I think Larry Fessenden is the Wendigo expert,
Hmm.
and his film is a little less literal. And the Wendigo, it just represents this puppeteer of dark forces. But I think that is also what Scott Cooper himself was going for, and like he is someone that's all about the underneath the horror. And in this one, there's the treatment of indigenous people,
Sure.
environmental consequences, the meth epidemic, abuse, inherited trauma, grief, poverty. And even if he doesn't balance all those themes perfectly all the time, it still feels very sincere. And I felt that same sincerity in Wendigo. And it would be a crime if he didn't watch it in preparation for this movie.
Yeah, hopefully he watched at least a few Wendigo movies. I should have watched a few Wendigo movies going into this because I haven't seen that Wendigo movie. I haven't seen really much when it comes to Wendigos, and I don't know much of the mythology, and I didn't go into this knowing that much. And so it was kind of interesting to see that he threw so much in, and I would say that that's maybe the weakest aspect of the movie is that I'm not sure which aspect of the grief, the trauma, the opioid epidemic, the native lands and all that, like so many things are being attributed to this, and it's like what actually is happening there.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I just I also feel like that's kind of the Wendigo. It's the shapeshifter, and it's just this umbrella of like the dark part of humanity.
Hmm.
And I don't. You can spin that in any which way, and you can say it's about everything or nothing, and that maybe that gives them too much creative license. But
Sure. Yeah.
I really like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll go to my next piece then, and that would be the TV series True Detective, which I feel like comes up a lot on this show in the last few years. I mean, it really kind of captured the public imagination, especially with that first season. But really, all three seasons in general, you get that small town feel. Middle America ravaged. I mean, this is of course Oregon, but still, ravaged by the opioid epidemic, and especially with that first season of the whole is it supernatural or is it not kind of feel where you never are quite sure. This movie definitely tries to hide, even with things that feel so supernatural, you then kind of start to lean into, well, maybe it's not, maybe it's just metaphorically speaking, maybe there's something else happening, and it definitely tries to ride that line where you're not quite sure if it's going to be supernatural or not.
That is very interesting. I wouldn't have thought True Detective, but now that you say it, I could totally see even Scott Cooper. Why is he not involved with that series?
Right,
What's he
absolutely.
doing?
It really seems like something he would be in, and I could totally see Jesse Plemons being in a season of True Detective. By the way, he's just awesome.
Yeah, I think like both of them and the series of True Detective and this movie, like there are certain aesthetics and themes, and yeah, even actors that I could see Keri Russell in a True Detective thing.
Oh,
So
definitely,
like
she's
there's like a
great.
lot of I don't know, they're kindred spirits, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I was going to say Jeremy Saulnier is someone who reminds me of Scott Cooper. Like, I think they're two filmmakers that have a very similar style, and he was supposed to do the third season of True Detective, and it like fell apart, I guess, in the planning stages. But yeah, it just kind of goes to show that that kind of a filmmaker would work in that kind of a world.
Someone who can really embrace bleak.
Yes,
Someone who just loves
absolutely.
bleak. Oh yeah, just love to roll around in darkness
And
like a pig in
darkness,
mud.
darkness is good. That's good stuff. What do you got for your next piece?
Okay, next piece. Next piece. I got "It Comes at Night," the 2017 Trey Schultz film,
Sure.
which is great. Which I feel like has a lot of similarities, and I guess starting aesthetically and then moving inwards. The
Mhm.
sick makeup they use in that film, I thought was super similar. Like just the way that plague operated in "It Comes at Night," the way that it functioned, I feel like functioned similarly in this one because you spend
Yeah.
so much time with this father getting sick, and in general, like both those films have this strong father son dynamic, and they both have that shared plague, and it's never about the monster, even though they both technically have them in there.
Yeah.
Um, but I saw a lot of similarities allegorically, and they're both sad and bleak. And
Sure.
I think Trey Schultz made "It Comes at Night" about his dad's death and about addiction, similar to this one dealt with the meth addiction, and
Yeah.
about how fear tears us apart.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that that's a good one, and definitely like the vibe that both of these movies go for is dark and bleak, and yeah, it really leans into that kind of a feeling a lot, and that's something that It Comes at Night did really well. And I hadn't thought of it, but the way you brought it up, the way that the makeup is done for the effects of that plague and It Comes at Night definitely does feel similar in what the effects of the Wendigo and addiction are here.
If I'm remembering right, I think there's a lot of like black ooze in
Yeah,
both, and
yeah.
they're very veiny.
Mhm.
I'm
Absolutely.
not quite sure. Yeah, it's an interesting choice. I don't know if that's just to it's just 'cause it's gross or to dehumanize, but I mean, obviously
Yeah,
there's something behind it.
absolutely. I'll go to my next piece, which is something I haven't seen in forever, but Poltergeist. Of course, Native American land being exploited by the white man, and all the chaos and supernatural stuff that comes from that, and again, we were already talking about how maybe the weaker point of this movie is that there are so many things going on that it's not all balanced as well as it could be. But that definitely is part of the catalyst for the Wendigo myth and for why all of this is happening here. And so I think it's an interesting parallel to something so classic like Poltergeist.
Yeah, no, I see that, and I think it's these people, family trauma with this element of the supernatural,
Yeah,
um, inflicting upon them. Like I think they both share that.
absolutely. Well, what do you got next?
What do I got next? Next I got The Ritual, the 2000. Did you see that one?
I did not. I've heard really great things about it though.
It's pretty good, and it's got a lot aesthetically similar. It's got the monster that I think Del Toro, who was a producer on this film, Antlers, he
Yeah.
um he had a quote when they were designing the Wendigo, and they talked about we have to remember that we're not creating a monster, we're creating a god, or I'm paraphrasing, something like that.
Mhm.
And in this film, The Ritual, they have a similar creature that's very based on like Norse god mythology, and I think it's got antlers, and
Yeah, I'm pretty
it's
sure it did. I
also
remember.
it's also these grieving, these people that are grieving and suffering, and represented through this monster in this beautiful forest, and I really appreciate that.
That's cool. Yeah, it takes a lot of like cues from nature, but at the same time, just really just messed up and, going far, far away from anything actually natural, which just makes it all the weirder. Which actually is a
Yeah.
good a good lead into my next piece, which I was going to kind of combine two pieces that both could work, but The Thing and Annihilation, both movies that take again that just this natural animal thing and kind of just grow it out in ways that are just totally unnatural and weird and just gets into some really crazy, bizarre creature design, which, I mean, really, I think that's what you kind of come for with a movie like this is the creature stuff. And I think that's what makes the movie successful is the fact that it does deliver on that, especially when we get to some of the weirder stuff towards the end.
Yeah, no, I see that. I think those are all good, and I think kind of what they share is they all have this I don't know, something that maybe I just lean towards as a preference is when films, when their characters have this golden trinity of they're placed in a situation that makes them reevaluate their relationship with themselves, their
Mm,
relationship with the people around them, and their relationship with nature. And then kind
yeah.
of when they have those three elements, especially like the nature one, and they're placed into this like bizarre situation, it's almost always gold.
Yeah.
It's always got my ticket when they do that. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think another thing you were just talking about Guillermo del Toro's involvement in this, and this movie, even though Scott Cooper is very much his own filmmaker, I mean, Crazy Hard, Out of the Furnace are both just amazing, and I really like Hostels as well.
Yeah.
Um, he has such a history of working with smaller filmmakers and things like The Orphanage and Mama and it just kind of it's interesting to see him take a filmmaker who's, got a little bit of a bigger name here in America at least, and, still kind of put his stamp on it as well.
And I think you can feel it. I mean, you can feel it in the design for sure. And I
Mhm.
think that like the respect towards the monster that feels totally Del Toro. I
Yeah.
think the missed opportunity there is they didn't put I know they had some kind of animatronic creature on set, but they got to figure out a way to make it Doug Jones. Otherwise,
Sure,
it's not
yeah.
a proper creature if you don't got Doug Jones playing
That's true. I mean, he might have been in there somewhere, maybe one
it.
of the weirder parts that we just will never know, but
He was playing the mine or something
yeah.
so abstract. It was beyond the Wendigo.
Absolutely. Right on. Well, what do you have next?
Yeah, well, I kind of want to continue on the Del Toro train because I feel
Okay.
like Del Toro is a producer. They're working together, and he's got a huge history of movies that you could use as a puzzle piece. But probably for me, Pan's Labyrinth felt like the most influential on this one. And maybe it's
Sure.
just the relationship with the monsters and the children,
Yes.
um, or that there is some kind of strong political statement baked in. They both feel like they're trying to hold a mirror up to the world in which they're representing him. And
Yeah.
I think that if Scott Cooper is rewatching one of Del Toro's films all the time, it's probably that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is I mean, that movie is so, I think, influential when it comes to creature design in the last, 20 years, and Del Toro in general is. And I think especially with the relationship with children, I think makes that these two movies are definitely a good pair there in that. I'll say also while we're on that track there, The Babadook is another movie I think would be a good one to include on the list. Of course, another one of those aspects that we kind of throw into the mix is the trauma that this kid, the main kid Lucas, has been going through with his family and with his dad especially, who is turning into this Wendigo creature, but is also an addict and going through all of that's going on in the household. And so you've got that baked in horror thing of trauma, which has been a very big thing lately, like dealing with issues like that within the world of horror. And again, this movie kind of eventually just kind of becomes a cool monster movie, but it's certainly there though, the fact that these characters all have to deal with it, and then we find out that the heroine of the film also has to deal with her own issues, her own past issues.
Well, she was great, by the way. I guess they both in the Babadook and with Keri Russell here. They yeah, the heroines in both films were
Yeah.
fantastic, and I think the while we're at the kids as well, I really liked the kids in Antlers.
Yeah.
I thought they both did a good job, but the main boy that we follow,
Jeremy
Antler boy.
Thomas.
Jeremy Thomas. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
There you
No, I see it, and I think what horror film of this current age has not been influenced by the Babadook? Like I think we hear that a lot, and I think it's kind of become synonymous with this term elevated horror that goes around a
Right.
lot. Even if that's not like I don't know, it's not my favorite term, but I see it, and I see what they're talking about, and I guess it is these films that are more they all have that similar trait of focusing on trauma then.
Yeah.
And there's some kind of hidden monster that they can be misread to the audience when in marketing.
It's an interesting term too, because like I feel like a movie like this clearly wants to be quote unquote elevated horror, but at the same time doesn't. And
That
and
makes
it's
sense.
yeah, like it totally like is trying to be just like sort of a fun horror movie too that doesn't have to be just as heavy as elevated horror, but yeah, but then it's kind of in the same trappings at the same time. So I don't know, it's probably part of that hard line that it had to ride here.
Yeah, and it's I don't know how they when you choose to really focus on plot versus that story and because this one does have the traditional like they're hunting the monster, they find the monster, it has the base and
Yeah.
it has all those elements, but and those crowd pleasing elements, but they marriage it well here, I thought.
Yeah. Well, what do you got for your next piece?
The film has a ton of pieces. And I
Yeah.
guess it's just because this is like the direction that horror is going. I had sort of a different one, a real small one, and it came out after the film, so obviously it wasn't a inspiration on it. But it's a book actually. It's a book called The Only Good Indians by Stephen Jones,
Hmm.
and it's about these four indigenous men suffering from supernatural torment after leaving their reservation. And I guess I just got to thinking about how this film was based on a short story, which is also based on another short story by Algernon Blackwood called Wendigo.
Right.
And then The Only Good Indians is very similar, like elk-like supernatural monsters. And just literature's relationship with this film is neat and worth mentioning, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, I would say there's probably a lot of Stephen King in this as well. Obviously,
Yeah.
Pet Cemetery, but others as well. I think just that kind of small town with lots of mythology and all the things that you would associate with the Stephen King, book or film. I think a lot of that is here.
I'm gonna admit a little bit of ignorance. I haven't seen Pet Cemetery. Isn't there a Wendigo sort of thing in it?
I haven't seen it since I was a kid, but I absolutely yes, there is definitely a Wendigo influence in there. I think it's even by name a Wendigo.
I think so. I think there's like
Yeah.
a very explicit Wendigo. Someone listening, they know.
Yeah,
They know what's going on.
absolutely. Yeah. So awesome. I will go to my last piece actually, and that I was just gonna say Scott Cooper's previous films.
Mhm.
I feel like they kind of make a path to this. And I'm not sure where Black Mass fits in, but the other ones, though, Out of the Furnace, of course, is the opioid epidemic and
Mhm.
joblessness and the decline of the American thing. Hostiles with Native American issues through the eyes of white people, and Crazy Heart with alcoholism and abuse. Three just excellent movies. Black Mass is good too, but I don't know where it fits in. But
It
but
doesn't quite, I don't
yeah,
think.
not really. But in the rest of my example, though, I think it's a pretty clear line that this is kind of a culmination of some of those ideas that he's been working on through these other movies, but filtered through horror.
And it's neat that it is all of those, and it's still, I think all of his films have this, like, harsh Western approach to them, which is
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And
Yeah.
even though this one feels like it's the culmination, it also feels like, it's very different for him.
Yeah.
Because I think that his other ones are pretty aggressively, like, Out of the Furnace is not supposed to be a crowd pleaser like this one. And
Right.
I think he was opening himself up to a wider audience with this, that
Yeah.
whether they showed up or not is, yet to be seen. I don't know, it's kinda getting, eclipsed by other stuff, but,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's cool to see him do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, do you have any more pieces?
Yeah, I mean, I kinda see, a little bit of Taylor Sheridan with him too, with, like, something like Wind River that
Sure.
also
Sure.
has these, like, takes place on a reservation, and, that's the Wendigo's whole MO is that, it comes from indigenous folklore.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
I think that they both have that same, there's a harshness to both of those. There's an element of, like, the environment is very much a character in the film,
Mm-hmm.
and, no, I see it with both of those. I think Cooper and Sheridan, they gotta team up at some point.
Yeah, I
I
could
don't know what
totally
they're
see
waiting
that.
on.
Yeah, well, and also Sheridan. I mean, I think better as a writer than director. Although Wind River's very good.
That's fair.
I would like to see them collaborate in that way. Him as the writer, and Cooper as the director. I think that would make for a great film.
Yeah, that's a match made in heaven right there. But
Yeah,
I think they both, I don't know, and it's interesting the way they both choose projects and the type of stories they both focus on. I think anytime, hey, I don't know, anytime they're doing anything close to, Western like material, I'm in.
yeah, absolutely. You know what? I'm gonna throw in one more piece
Bring
that
it on,
it's
man.
it's not really like a full-on puzzle piece because it did not come out before this movie, but it feels more like it would be a good companion piece with this movie. And of course, if it wasn't for COVID delays, I'm not even sure which would have came out first. But it's The Empty Man, a horror
Oh, I
movie
saw
from
it.
yeah, it's a good
Yeah.
movie, and it's this movie that I think everybody who sees it kind of seems to agree it's going to be like this cult classic that just it was so strange. It got released during the pandemic to theaters. Like you always think of like dumping to, streaming or something like that. It was dumped to theaters and
Mhm.
nobody saw it. And because nobody was going to the theaters at that time. But it's a very interesting kind of horror movie that has so much built-in mythology behind it. And when you're dealing with something like the Wendigo, you've got so much mythology to build this whole thing around. And then on top of that, you've got like the Lovecraft inspired creature design, which kind of runs through some of our other pieces as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, consider me a part of the cult 'cause I quite like The Empty Man, and I see what you're talking about, like, with all the mythology, and just like I don't know, The Empty Man and the way that they did so much with what wasn't seen
Sure.
necessarily,
Yeah,
I thought was really good. All the stuff that,
absolutely.
like, is going on that you don't necessarily get the full view of.
Yeah, absolutely. You're kind of as lost as the detective that's trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, and they both have, like, a methodical nature to them
Mm-hmm.
or something, and maybe that, I don't know, reminds me of Jesse Plemons again. Jesse Plemons, I think is how you pronounce it, but he's kinda got that, that's his role in this film. He's the detective trying to figure it out. And
Yeah,
he's great. He could do
absolutely.
so much with doing nothing. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys you could watch sit and it'd be fascinating.
Oh,
You'd
absolutely.
project so much onto him.
Love him. He's so good.
And in this one, well, in this one in particular, like he's got so many moments of just like the blank gaze
Yeah.
that is informing all these moments, and I thought that
Yeah.
was really cool.
Absolutely. Well, any more pieces you wanted to bring up?
I did, so I was watching an interview with Scott Cooper, and
Mm-hmm.
he mentioned Alien, and and this is kind of a group of them, but he was mentioning himself a few films like The Exorcist, Don't Look Now, The Shining, and I guess those are his puzzle pieces that he's giving to us here in spirit that he
Okay.
said were an influence. And I guess I can't explain why he chose all of them, but I think it's
Sure.
interesting he chose all those.
Hey, well, The Shining, I mean, we already brought up Stephen King, so there's a little bit of
Yeah.
that. And
Well, even The Exorcist, Poltergeist, like
yeah,
I see the similarities here.
connections there for sure. Yeah, no, that's cool getting some of that insight from those interviews. So, yeah, let's go ahead. We'll close this up. I'm going to do the finished puzzle, and then we'll get into some closing thoughts here. We talked about Alien, werewolf movies, Wendigo, True Detective, It Comes at Night, Poltergeist, The Ritual, Annihilation, The Thing, Pan's Labyrinth, The Babadook, The Only Good Indians, Scott Cooper's other films, Wind River, The Empty Man, The Exorcist, Don't Look Now, and The Shining. Really the main thing here, to me, the reason why I like this movie a lot, and I said this in my like little letterboxed, one paragraph review. I was anticipating since last year when this got delayed because of COVID. I was anticipating this interesting, like unique thriller from Scott Cooper, the director of Out of the Furnace and Crazy Heart. And I don't know that it's as interesting as I had hoped for, but what I got is a really cool little horror movie with a great monster. And I think
Yeah.
it's very effective in that. And so I to me it's a success on the terms of what the movie actually is.
No, I'm in complete agreement, man. I thought it was great, and I really like Wendigo based content. It's a niche, but I look forward to more things coming out about it. I think that it's an endless reservoir of horror and material.
Yeah, I feel like I need to do a deep dive into Wendigo before whatever the next Wendigo movie is that comes
Do it, man,
around.
and then I'll come back on and we'll exclusively do Wendigo movies, and we'll be
Let's
good.
do it, man. Let's
I
do
did.
it for sure.
I do want to mention I did the one of my pieces was the Wendigo movie that
Hmm.
Larry Fessenden did, and I worked with him on the last film I did, and
Oh, nice.
he really is a wealth of knowledge on this stuff. I think he edited a book. It was called I think it was called Sudden Storm, a Wendigo Reader, and he just it's like a encapsulation of all these stories and stuff about it. He's a good place to start. That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying. He's the
nice.
entryway.
Nice, nice.
Uh,
I
yeah.
wanted to say what one last thing before we close this up is that one thing, and of course we always get into spoilers here on the show. We assume everybody is going to deep dive further into the movie by listening to us talk here. I just love that at the end of the movie when Keri Russell realizes that the other kid is infected by this Wendigo and there's no turning back, she just goes and stabs him to death. Like,
It's the
like,
it's the most anti-mom
yes,
moment I could think. I cannot imagine. It was so dark. Oh my god.
yeah. You
Yeah.
never see that in movies. There's always got to be drawn out, like oh I can't do this. You got to wrestle with it. No, she just stabs the shit out of him. He's done.
I think you got to respect her commitment. And I
Yes.
don't even know that she fully knew that he would become one. She was on top of it. She was like,
Yeah.
"There's a chance he's going. I'm sorry.
Yep. I'm not fucking around.
It's got to happen." Man, no, it was crazy. I don't know. It's not as explicit as maybe people might think, but
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to
Right.
be when you caress a child and tell
Yeah.
them they're okay while you hold a knife.
Yeah.
It's
Just
just
stab it into them.
dark, dude. It's just dark.
Very, very dark.
But I can appreciate. I don't know. I like it. I think that whole showdown with Keri Russell and the
Mhm.
monster. As long as we're getting in the spoilers, I don't know. It's just interesting the way they did the way she's like ripping into it
Yeah.
and grabbing its fiery heart. And all
Yeah.
that was
It's very
neat.
violent and not particularly gory. I mean, a little bit, especially when it's got the guy's face on its face, but it's not particularly that gory. It's just
Yeah.
violence. It's very, very violent.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, the little moments of violence it has go a long way. Like when he's transforming and the antlers just burst out of their
Yeah.
mouths. It's gross. No
A lot of
thanks.
good sound
Yuck.
design. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Uh,
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up on Antlers. Is there another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
oh yeah, I really liked the film Beta Test that just came out.
Oh, yes,
Have you
great.
got a chance to see it yet?
Just yesterday. Yeah, I loved it.
I thought it's great, and like even bigger than that, I just think that like what Jim Cummings and Co are doing is so cool in indie
Yeah.
filmmaking. Like they've really carved their own space with Thunder Road and Wolf of Snow Hollow and now the beta test. And they just kind of have their own thing and they're taking risks and they're doing it in a very like transparent way. They're very open about their process and I super like that one. That was
That's
cool.
awesome. Yeah, great recommendation there. Everybody should check that out. And we are actually planning an episode on that soon. So definitely everybody should check that out before we get to that episode. But awesome, Riley. This was great. Why don't you tell people again where they can find you and your work and your upcoming film?
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of just around on. I linger on the Instagram these days at
Hmm.
RS Cusick. You can reach out there. But yeah, other than that, it's just making films. I got Autumn Road coming out November 23rd. Excited about that one. I think you can pre-order it right now on iTunes. But when it comes out, it's supposed to be on all those the transaction websites. So it's on the Amazon Prime and Google Play and Vudu and
Hmm.
all those good places where you can rent and buy a movie. I think we have a limited Blu-ray release, and I think that's the best thing.
Nice.
I am so excited about having a physical copy of something.
Oh,
It's
that's
getting me
great.
jazzed. I'm looking forward to getting the Antlers physical, and then I'll stick them next to each other.
Nice. Beautiful. Well, I look forward to checking out your movie when it comes out. And I thank you very much for joining me here on Piecing It Together.
Hey man, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Dietrich.
I'm Alex.
And I'm Ben.
We're from the podcast That Song From That Movie, the journey through the very best and worst of movie songs.
We want you to join us on our voyage across the cinematic sound waves as we take a deep dive on a new song and movie each week to figure out just what makes them tick.
Already we've set sail with Celine Dion on the Titanic, found a friend in Toy Story, and gotten drenched out in the rain with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Hopefully each breakdown allows us to answer the ultimate question of what's better, the movie or the song. Or at least learn something new along the way.
Just like learning that Toy Story 4 is a meaningless cash grab without a soul.
You can subscribe right now on all good podcast platforms. If you use one of the bad ones, then that's on you, and we can't be held responsible.
Subscribe to That Song From That Movie.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Antlers. Thanks to Riley Cusick for joining me to talk about that one. Make sure you check out his film Autumn Road, which comes out on VOD very, very soon. Maybe up for pre-order right now, I believe he said. So, yeah, as always, I want to remind you to make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts, and rate and review us, and 5 stars, and share the show, and post it on your socials and do all those things. That's awesome. I appreciate everybody that's out there listening, and definitely get in touch with me if you ever want to join me for an episode of Piecing It Together. Riley got in touch with me, and you should get in touch with me. I'm always happy to hear from people who enjoy our format of looking at movies through the lens of what other movies might have inspired it. I love when people get in touch with me and tell me about puzzle pieces that we might have missed, and I just think that's awesome when people have like their own ideas of what movies might have inspired these movies that we didn't quite get to, or people who get in touch with me and want to join me for a future episode. It's always awesome. So definitely get in touch. I'm on social media pretty much constantly at Piecing Pod on Twitter, but you can find at Piecing Pod on Instagram as well. I'm on Facebook, and of course we have the Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces Facebook group, which is a part of this show, so check that out. And don't forget about the Produced by David Rosen Patreon with lots of bonus content. Speaking of the bonus content on the Patreon, I am going to play a piece of my music, which I may post as a bonus thing there on Patreon. As you know, I just recently released an album, The Dissection Table, which is the score of an unreleased film that just never came out, a horror film. And so I decided to take the music and turn it into the soundtrack album. And what I'm about to play for you is from a short film that never got completed and never happened. And I have this music. And so I'm thinking right now I might as well put it out in some way. So this is a little clip from that film. I'm not going to reveal the name of it or any other info about it, but I may go back to the music, which is pretty finished, but maybe not 100% finished, and put it together into a release for the Patreon. That's the kind of bonus content you can expect. Stuff that may or may not happen, but probably will at some point because I like to make myself busy. So anyway, this is some music from an unreleased film. Hope you enjoy it, and we'll be back with more piecing it together real soon.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.